Time now for us to look at the story of the day. Now, recent decisions at Africa's mobile networks, MTN and Vodacom, may help drive these engines of the economy to new heights. In a recent move, MTN appointed a new CEO following months of upheaval, whilst Vodacom on Friday announced a double pay for its CEO. Poached from the Vodafone Group, Rob Shutter, a South African with vast experience in the telecom sector, has been headhunted for the CEO post at MTN. His appointment comes as MTN is reviewing its governance and management operating structure. Meanwhile, experts believe Vodacom's pay hike of its CEO, Shamil Yusuf, was prompted by an increase in its total revenue across South Africa and the continent. And to further discuss this, whether this is a bubble or could help drive the engines of the economy, aiding in job creation, we joined via Skype by Arthur Goldstuck, the Managing Director of Worldwide Works. Arthur, thanks so much for your time. Just looking at the latest announcement, of course, with MTN under pressure regarding the Nigeria deal and Vodacom giving a double salary to its CEO. Is this a sign of the good times, or are there concerns?
Thank you and good evening. I do think that it's a sign that both companies are looking to the future and towards growth, and both need to take very firm steps to make sure that they have solid leadership in this near future. And in MTN's case in particular, they appointed a new group CEO who was heading Vodafone's operations in Europe. So that tells us that they were quite happy to go to the opposition and headhunt their next leader from that stable. And I suspect part of the reason that Shamil got his pay doubled was to make sure that he doesn't get tempted away by the competition. So I think they really, aside from rewarding good performance, want to ensure that the management remains absolutely stable at a very challenging time for the industry. In MTN's case, what's really interesting is not just the announcement of the new group CEO, but also a vice president in charge of M&A, that's mergers and acquisition, as well as strategy. So that tells us two things. One is that they are certainly planning to go on the acquisition trail in the next while. And that's all the more reason that Vodacom has to make sure that they keep a tight ship. But the other aspect of that new job, they'll only announce the appointment in the next 10 days or so. But the other key role will be strategy. And that's an area where MTN has been particularly weak. They've been strategically slow and unable to respond nimbly and swiftly to changes in the market. So I think that's going to change. And we're going to see MTN becoming a much more aggressive company, both in terms of acquisition and in terms of shifts in their overall strategy. And that, in turn, should spur a new era of growth for MTN.
What has the advent of competition such as Cell C and now Telkom also getting their ducks in a row, considering being a formidable contender in the telecom space? What does this mean going forward in terms of market share for these two entities?
Naturally, they will and must lose market share to other players because they are so dominant in the market. I think what wasn't expected was the extent to which Cell C would grow its user base, and in terms of user numbers, increasing its market share quite significantly. But that came at a high cost. So in terms of profit share in the industry, I would say that Cell C rather, is still far behind. But the dark horse in this race is definitely Telkom, which saw a dramatic percentage increase in its user numbers in its last results. But with that, it was still a relatively low number. So the big players might think that there's still a small player in the mobile market, but Telkom is definitely coming at them as well. So they've got the dual challenge of Telkom and Cell C. Cell C, of course, having had a stake bought by Blue Label, which gives them added financial muscle as well as added strategic muscle. So you're seeing a very competitive environment emerging now.
Do you think the two entities will be looking more to capture market? And you are talking about mergers and acquisitions outside the conventional parameters of Africa and South Africa more specifically. Do you think that they will have to diversify their product share, or rather product offering, to the consumer?
They certainly have to do that. For a while, both MTN and Vodacom were making loud noises about the threat of the OTT players, over-the-top players like WhatsApp and Facebook and the like. But what's been very obvious in their most recent results is the contribution that WhatsApp especially has made to the growth in their data users. So while that might be threatening their voice revenues and certainly has decimated their SMS revenues, it's also brought an entirely new category and a whole new generation of data user on board and expanded their data user base, as well as, of course, increased data use and data traffic dramatically on their networks. And for those customers, they have to start offering new products and products that complement the OTT offerings that are already available without the intervention of the mobile operators.
Is there still virgin land, though, when it comes to the telecom space, particularly with the national imperative of closing the digital divide? We know that especially Androids and smartphones, it's a dime a dozen these days, easily accessible. But is there an unserved market that both monopolies are not looking at?
There are quite a few unserved categories, or underserved categories, one could rather say. And for example, in South Africa, you have the situation where of around 24 million smartphone users, a quarter of them, 25% of those at least, are not actively using their data because they're terrified of switching on their data connection. They don't want to take the risk of their airtime being eaten up by data updates and the like. Even if they don't use those terms, they might not be aware of background updates or data creep or anything like that. They just know that when they switch on this internet on their phones, it uses up airtime through data. So that category of user needs to be served in a different way, either low-cost data or through Wi-Fi provided by the mobile networks. One way or another, you have something like 6 million users who are waiting to be served, and there isn't an offering for them at this stage.
Do you think this could lead to more jobs being created, or is it just a case of maintaining the status quo for both companies?
There's certainly room for jobs to be created in, for example, rolling out Wi-Fi networks countrywide. And one area where we have seen jobs created is in the fiber networks that are being laid down. When you look at the small players like Vumatel in particular, who are laying down fiber through the suburbs, they've created an entirely new category of employment virtually. And for that industry to be expanded and rolled out to the general public, it could be a massive job creation program for government as well as for the networks. All the operators need to be in that game. They're all to some extent playing in that game, but at different levels. And it's the independent little guys who are investing heavily and getting investors behind them, in fact, to lay down the fiber and create jobs. It's probably the biggest job creation program that we've seen in the telecom space, and yet it's happened almost invisibly because it's the little guys doing it.
All right, Arthur, we're going to leave it there. Thanks indeed for your time. That's Arthur Goldstuck, the Managing Director for Worldwide Works, talking about the latest developments with MTN and Vodacom, respectively.